Are you done fixing your hair? Oh my god. Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, I asked you... I came across this video on Facebook a couple days ago, like earlier this week. And I asked if you'd be willing to watch it with me again, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. And the reason why is because of the stuff he's talking about kind of comes from your generation.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's a baby boomer thing.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, he's talking about Black history, but it's kind of like more your era than my era. If that makes sense. So. Are you also tired of seeing more of this?
You can't be American and wear that mask. You cannot. We literally had a war about this.
You ain't gonna win! My wrist. Down the street, the cops are gonna have his name. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
You don't need a mask.
Relax.
Man, I can't breathe in my face. Just get up.
As I watch the video and listen to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright.
No peace! No justice! No...
Throw the fist, man. Throw it. Throw it.
And less of this. Let's talk. Bam 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 bam. Cafe. Bam ba 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 ba. Cafe. Dun 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 dun. Cafe. We will still see both of us. Okay. Hope it's actually recording. Where we can hear it. Okay.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Slavery didn't destroy the black family. Do you know that we were still getting married through slavery? Jumping a broom in secret, even under punishment of death. We were married during Reconstruction. We were married during civil rights. When do you begin to see the rise of the single-parented black female household? 1970. After they killed Dr. King, the United States government said we must neutralize the black power base. And they determined that the black power base was the black family. It was independent black skilled men and women who financed King, financed Mr. Garvey, financed Mr. Muhammad, financed SNCC and CORE, the Freedom Riders and the sit-in movement. So they said, if we want to crush the black struggle, we got to crush the black family. So guess what they did in 1970? King dies in 68. In 1970, they came into the black communities and de-industrialized our city centers. In 1970, they started shutting down the factories. Remember, up until the 50s and 60s, you didn't need a college degree to get a decent job. Many of us got grandparents who worked in factories their whole life and lived better lives than we're living now with 2 and 3 degrees. They could work in their same neighborhood and everybody worked for the factory. Good retirement, pension, benefits, medical. They started shutting down the factories in 1970, and then they went into the high schools and did what? Started deindustrializing the inner city high schools. Up until 1970, you could graduate from almost any school in New York, certified as a plumber, certified as an electrician, certified as a carpenter, auto body, brick mason, a welder. They took all those programs out. These are the skills that pays the bills, gentlemen. As long as you have a skill, you can always feed your family. But if all you got is college degrees, you might end up in the unemployment line. Why? Because the skills that we learn in college are not necessarily marketable to other black people. I'm a psychologist. Ain't too many black people running around looking for a psychologist to reveal all the skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, you gotta talk to a white
Exactly.
person.
So they started sending us to college instead of teaching us how to work with our hands. That was the 70s. That was the economic castration of the black male. Now let's go to 1980. The CIA comes in, cocaine import agency. They drop off crack. So now the unemployed black man who has always been a breadwinner, Envy, even in slavery, we were always the breadwinner up until 1970. Now the crack comes. You got a decision. I can sell this crack and try to put some food on the table, or I can smoke it to deal with the fact that I'm no longer economically relevant to the black woman. And let's be clear, the decade of the 70s was the decade of making the black man economically irrelevant to the black woman. We're the only man in America who is out-earned and out-educated by our mates. No other woman in America out-earns and out-educates their mates. And this is not the black woman's problem. I want to be clear. This was systematically done to make us irrelevant to our families. Then the 1990s come, Bill Clinton crime bill. 3 strikes and you out. Mandatory minimum wages, the Bill Clinton crime bill. Now all those unemployed black men who got caught smoking crack or selling crack now being sent off to jail. And then they also give us the ADHD so that we could dope the kids up with the same medicine that sent the father to jail. Then the year 2000 come, George Bush hits us with the what? Faith-based initiative. He finds a loophole in federal law that allows you to finance churches. So now the mega churches and the medium-sized churches in the black community, Charlemagne, are being financed by the government. You think it's a coincidence, Envy, that you don't see no major churches involved in the miseducation movement? No major churches involved in the mass incarceration movement? No major churches involved in police genocide? No major churches involved in poverty? Where is the black church in 2017 when it comes to black people issues? They're missing in action because they're being paid by the government to stay out of the struggle. And that's why it's called faith-based initiative. Your pastor is the new FBI agent.
Wow. Well, where you going to tell me you going to be tonight?
He's right. It wasn't just the blacks, though. It was all men, really, of that class. But it happened worse to blacks. And it's because of all our wins from the civil rights movement.
So it's basically what you guys did during the 60s. And...
Remember I told you there was a backlash?
Yeah, which is basically we're still feeling the ripple effect from the backlash. That's why what us millennials and Generation Z have been dealing with and why it feels like history is repeating itself is because of that ripple effect that your generation started.
Yeah. They took the trades out of high school. They took driver's ed out of high school.
Yeah, I remember you were pissed when I became that age and it was time to teach me how to drive and you wanted to you had your money saved up and everything to pay for me to go
the summer school
for
for driver's ed, yeah.
And then found out that there was no such thing anymore. Yeah, I remember that. You were so pissed about that.
Yeah. I mean, we got our license 12, 14,
you
know. And you couldn't really go full time until you were 16. You had to drive with an adult, but that was when you got your training license.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get your training license until a lot later, so.
Well, then I have a question. With history repeating itself, because listening to him when he was talking about them basically putting all the stuff in place to destroy the black family and basically putting everything where more and more black women tended to find themselves being single moms. Do you feel like they're starting to do that with the other races now, specifically poverty-stricken areas? Like, take our area, for example. I am part of the minority being a single mom. Everyone I know is a single mom, and it's not just because I was a teenage mom. Honestly, when you think about it, I had my kids later than most of my classmates. Most of my classmates were the 16, 13, 12, and pregnant. I was at least pregnant 17, 18. And, but I am still part of that majority of single parents that are, there. And I'm not the only one. I mean, Tamara, she was in her 30s and was a single mom, and that's also another common theme for people in their 30s and 20s that, to be single parents. It's one thing that Kelly, David, and I tend to talk about a lot is the fact that when it comes to dating, it's very, you have one of two choices. You can try to wait out for that one very rare person that has yet to have kids and doesn't have all the baby daddy or baby mama drama, or you just hunker down and become a step parent because it's really, or you just stay single. Those are really your only choices when it comes to relationships for my generation and a lot of the generations around ours.
Well, think about this. In junior high we were set on our career path. We were given tests that showed where your aptitude was.
Mm-hmm.
And most countries around the world do that.
They still do.
In junior high, yeah.
Yeah, I know, like, that's why there's those really big tests in Japan, South Korea, and I think China does it too. Like, a lot of Asian countries and then a lot of European countries have this test that you do in high school, and you do it throughout high school, but it's to
Well, this was junior
kind
high.
of give you an idea of where your strengths are so you can choose your careers properly for when you become an adult.
This is junior high. The first year of junior high, we took the test. And then you have 3 years in junior high to kind of mull it over.
Mm-hmm.
And when you enter high school, when you sign up for your classes, because they were set up kind of semi-college. Mm-hmm. You had your basic, you had to do math and English.
Yeah.
But you signed up for most of your other classes when you entered high school. So 10th grade, 9th grade you'd sign in, but 10th grade, when you entered high school, you entered either classes that would prepare you for college, or you'd start doing your training to prepare you as a journey person into a trade. They started taking that out in the 80s, and it didn't matter which school you were from. They moved it into what was called junior colleges, which were 2-year colleges. So you could go in for nursing degree or mechanics or all of that at junior college. And those were for the ones that failed out of high school that couldn't get into college. So there was a period there where they stretched it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they were just stretching it for the white kids, and they didn't give the same priority to the minorities.
It's kind of like the struggle that Andreas used to have. And I mean, luckily he made it. I mean, he's now with the Denver Broncos. Last I checked, he's still with them.
Right.
But if he didn't play football, and if he not only didn't he play football, but he was built for football because he wasn't a small guy. He was a big, broad guy. But if he wasn't built for football, wasn't good at football, he wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity. Being a dirty Mexican from Mexico,
right,
who could barely speak English. No. Sit there and soak. You guys are dirty.
I mean, because my little brother looked like he was a dirty Mexican, speaking of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Because of our mix, you know. He tried the fields that he could get into, which was tarring roofs and, you know, doing grunt work, which was what the Mexicans were moved into.
And it was because
a lot of the black males were moved into.
Yeah, and it was because of what he looked like.
Yeah. And then he was able to get a sales job. Yeah. And did well at it because he had a personality. Because he was being dyslexic, you know, you learn to talk.
Right, he learned how to
you learn to orate and survive.
Yeah.
Memorize faces, you know.
Yeah, it's like me. I could do better if I could sit down and write it out and then talk it out. You know, if I have time to process something before I approach it like this video. You know, I told you about the night that I came across it, and then I sent it to myself, and then I've processed it, you know, but this is only the second time I've watched it.
But yeah, it's something the upper classes have always done. They need somebody down below to take money from, basically.
So they've basically gone, okay, we've done everything we can to the minorities. Now let's attack the people that were born into poverty, make sure that they can't get out of poverty.
And they're turning the middle class into the lower classes. And now we're back at that stage before the Great Depression where they're pitting people on top of each other. It's not your fault, it's their fault.
Basically,
but we're not going to tell you it's really our fault.
Kind of like the battle between Black Lives Matter and LGBT.
Right.
You know,
You won't get anything unless you attack them.
Yeah. And then it's, like the whole thing of the rich, like the poor against the poor. Like that's really what they're doing, but they're blaming it on the color, even though really we're all the same, but they're taking advantage of our color of skin.
Yeah, it's a pattern in capitalism because they can only be greedy for so long because then they start bodying each other's heads.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at right now. They're biting each other's heads. And the population is going down, and you have to have consumers to sell anything.
But then they're not giving us enough money to even pay our rent, and then they're wondering where all their money is going.
No, there are some in the upper crust that know quite well.
Understand what they're doing, yeah.
It's the ones that are moving up into the upper crust that don't understand the pattern that has been there since capitalism started.
Mm.
And that's when royalty ended, was when capitalism went full.
I'm going to pause this for a minute and I'm going to go check on Brett. Okay. So, going back to the previous part, when you were talking about how they started taking things out of school, I remember your frustrations when I was in school and we would talk about that. But I'm kind of curious on, do you think they've made it, how back when I was in school they tried to no, the American dream still exists. You can still get your big house and have your family, the white, with the white picket fence and everything. Do you think they still have tried to keep that facade there? I remember back in elementary school they used to ask all of us kids, which honestly I thought was so strange, but they'd ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then they'd ask us on a more serious question our junior year of high school. Or junior year of high school. And if we didn't want to get into say with me, I want to get into my writing, which ironically I'm about to graduate with a degree in writing. I want to get into my writing, and their first thing was, you can't make money from that, choose something else. They literally said that bluntly. Mm-hmm. Bluntly said it that way. Not just one of my teachers, all of my teachers would say that.
Right.
Even the ones I respected.
I mean, part of that originally is art fields are very hard to make careers out of. Mm-hmm. And so you purposely discourage, but you're supposed to discourage in a way that they have to have the will and the desire to do the art in order to get through that trouble year, where you're trying to make money and still do your art.
Yeah. Which everyone is.
Yeah, which every artist goes through.
There's any genre of art that you go into. Any genre of art you go into, you're going to have that period where, you've gone through all the training, you've done all the lessons and stuff, and you just hope you go into one that you can at least make something out of a career. You were a ballerina. Ballerinas are very limited.
Right.
You have a very limited time to try and make something of yourself, where at least me as a writer, I kind of have a chance to try and make myself out there. It'd be nice if I can do it while I'm young, when I'm older. But so there is that. There's the artists that don't get recognized until after they pass away. Or you have artists like Merle who gets recognized, but then she's I get recognized later in my life, and now I'm almost 70 and still working like I was in my 20s. The difference is at least I'm getting paid now. Right.
Yeah, art's always been a volatile field anyway.
Yeah, but I always thought it was interesting that it honestly, looking back, it pisses me off that my teachers would let me discourage any of my classmates that would not want to get into those type of fields. And yet, I love, this one Reddit post I came across that and honestly, I almost got Reddit just to follow this one person. But they were like, all these people saying you can't make a career out of being an artist, getting a liberal arts degree, should not be allowed to watch movies, read books, listen to music, enjoy, paintings and photographs, and like start listing off of all of this stuff because it's liberal art degree people who create that type of stuff. So if you're against liberal arts, you shouldn't be allowed to enjoy what comes from them, was his take on it.
Weird take.
I mean, it's like
it would
extreme.
be like telling a scientist not to experiment.
Well, no, I mean, like, this is like someone who was like a business person, right?
Right.
Who made a lot of money. But he's like, I think we should no longer have liberal art degrees, period. We should destroy them altogether. We shouldn't allow people to get into those type of industries. And so this other person had basically replied to them and stated, then stop enjoying music, stop enjoying movies, and start going to art museums. It listed off like all these like liberal art stuff.
That's less about trying to get rid of the artist and more about trying to take anything that might teach self-questioning and thinking and alternative.
Yeah, but you also understand where the other guy was coming from too. Is if you don't support this stuff, you shouldn't enjoy the stuff that comes from something you don't support. I mean, it's kind of like I'm not going to pay the artist, but I'm going to listen to his music.
Think back in time, and what has always held up in all ancient civilizations? It's the art.
Yeah.
It's the music. It's the poetry.
Well, we have to have our entertainment. We have to have our break from. But if we get rid of our artist,
you get rid of part of what's human.
Yeah, and that's what I hate about these people like that guy that basically are like, we should get rid of liberal arts.
But is he doing it believing that philosophy, or is he doing it to manipulate? That's the fun these days.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
Your hair is wet?
Sure. No.
He wants to show his chest off.
Yeah. Because the camera's on.
Okay, I'll sit over here. Yeah. No, my fun with what he's talking about. One, he's too young to have experienced it, but
yeah, he probably like heard it from his grandparents or something.
Yeah. But remember Tom Hartman when he was pointing out the class wars?
It's been a while since I've watched that video.
I mean, it was real fun in my era because all these guys came back from Vietnam. And suddenly there was this mass population. And of course, being boomers, we were a lot of population to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And you had people with lots of skills that had no jobs.
Because there was too many of you.
Because there were too many. Right. And of course, they came back and were able to take college. And those that were trying to get out of service, you could go through college and you didn't have to be in service until college was over, which was why a lot of the wealthy were pushing for the fight against the war too, because they didn't want their sons to be, they were drafted at that time.
Well, I also noticed, like, with your generation, that statistically you guys are also one of the first generations to do a lot of not only international travel, but international work.
Yeah, we did.
Like, you guys had one of the higher populations of visas. like work visas.
Yeah, because it was one way to get out of the country for a while and see the other cultures without having lots of money. So we did a lot of stuff that became illegal later, like, hitchhiking and
Which people still do,
technically. But no, you could go anywhere and you'd see a hitchhiker in my day.
Yeah.
But it was common because you didn't have as many cars.
Yeah.
You have to realize technology has really moved forward fast.
Yeah, like within these last, not even a few generations. I mean, shoot, I can remember like my first cell phone was a flip phone, and yet now they have these smartphones, touchscreen phones.
In my dad's age in the West, people were still going wagon and horses, and he had a car in college, It was old and rusty and one of the first, but took 6 of them to get it going by pushing it and jumping back in. But he had a car.
Goals.
Goals.
Well, I mean, sometimes your goals are small, and I mean, it's like I finally got my first house in my 20s, and yeah, she's a fixer-upper, but hey, I did my goal of getting my house in my 20s.
But they weren't just. Tom Hartman talked about how when the Reagan years hit and the unions were crushed, there were a lot of things that happened. And one of the things that happens is your trades started losing their income because people would, well, I'm not going to pay that,
Kind of like now with the mechanics, and I'm not going to pay $75 an hour for you to fix my car because I don't even make $75.
I remember the neighbor I used to babysit for. He was ex-boxer and ended up starting a sewage company and made lots of money, made a fortune in sewage. But the income is down. And that's when what was it, 78 is the last time the minimum wage is raised. In the 80s, they started devaluing anything to do with trades. So that's another reason they claimed they needed to take trades out of school because you couldn't make a living.
Even though they're the reason why that happened.
And now they're trying to push it again. Because it's the trades that stay in this country.
Right.
Whereas they send all the rest overseas. I mean, even programmers are going mostly from overseas or being brought here and being paid little to nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of like my friend Wesley. Like the moment he got out of high school and he had the chance to take that opportunity, the computer degree, he left. He's in the UK.
Right.
He's like, ah. And his family like hated him for it, but he survived. He's one of the few I've come across that have survived. And then, like, you look at the majority of my classmates, even the ones that did go to college, they're still doing the same thing that they were doing before just because the jobs aren't there.
But in the late 70s and 80s, you had an influx of immigrant students that were brought over on purpose, not just to fill up the colleges, but to teach computer science and engineering and mathematics and medicine. And they were supposed to go home, but a lot of them were contacted as soon as they graduated by corporations in this country because they could pay them less than the American ones.
And now you have like a lot of Americans going across these trying to find work again.
When wages get too high for the corporations, they find some way of manipulating it so they can bring it back down, force it down, and make you fear not being able to get a job if you don't do this.
Right. It's like I remember that I had to fight through that fear myself. And honestly, there's like a bit of freedom getting to where I'm at, where it's like, I can quit the job I currently have, there will be another one down the road.
But not
But
too
it
many
takes
people
a
can
lot.
do that.
Yeah, and it does take a lot to get to that mindset.
Yeah. And you complain about this house, but think about what the average rental everywhere is right now. Is
Same
one
condition,
one
but
to
10
two
times more.
thousand a month.
And I try not to complain about this house. I don't want to sound like I'm not grateful for it. It's just, it's frustrating when I'm sitting there and next thing I know my hallway is filled with toilet water. Or the fact
And we
that
don't have hot running water. But
And
I
we
may
don't-
have found a system we can use. But
Okay. And then we have no electricity in our kitchen area on a portion of our house.
well, it's only like, a small portion of the house.
Yeah, but the problem is trying to get someone out here.
It's coronavirus.
Yeah.
Everything else.
And then, like, is it an emergency? It's like, I don't know.
Not
I
really.
have an outlet that keeps blowing a fuse. Like, I mean, I literally have a section of my house that keeps blowing fuses. I have my fridge hooked up to the outside of the house right now with an extension cord. I have these little fairy lights as my lights for the kitchen living room in there. It's not an emergency, but if my house burns down, can I turn around and sue you?
Well, see, to prevent Texas, we're going to create a solar and wind system and just say to electricity and rewire the damn thing. Sorry.
Mary John. I will throw you back in the tub. No, as I said, when I heard what he was saying, a lot of it did sound, pretty reasonable. It was just, I needed a second opinion on from someone that actually was more from that time period. Because I was like, I don't feel like I have the right as a millennial to talk about that.
Well, corporations have done what they need. I don't know if you call it a need, desire to make as much profit as possible. And cheap goods are hard to find anymore unless you come into a country and take them. Slavery was the cheapest labor out there.
And they're trying to basically get it back.
Right.
And that's like the whole scandal of the minimum wage thing. The minimum wage thing kind of pisses me off. Like, I came across a post the other day. It was comparing and contrasting the minimum wage and versus
living wage.
Versus like it was the average income versus the average expenses up through the years. And then the guy who had posted it was like, see, there's not a problem here. And I'm sitting here doing the math in my head going, really, there's not a problem because the expenses has gone up. Like, one of the things he had shown was back in your day, you could have done the same amount of college I have just done for less than $20,000.
I paid for my college working for the most part. I was working full time and going to college full time. Of course, I didn't have any kids.
Yeah. But it was showing like you could do that, right?
Yeah,
so it was like
you could
7.8
do that.
hours of work was able to pay off your college, and you could pay it yourself, right? Comparing it to my time, right? And it was like 17 to 20 hours plus.
I mean, I was paying for my college plus an apartment plus living expenses and a new car because
We can't even pay our college expenses, so any of that. Well, I'm just saying, like, that was one of the things he had, right? And then he was showing how much it's increased, right?
It's major, but then it was our grandparents who, the old business of I walked 5-10 miles to school, which some of them did, but most of them didn't.
You mean you rode a horse?
Right. But there was my grandmother would tell me about 5-cent bread, you know.
Yeah.
And now bread is $3-4 a loaf.
5, depending on what brand.
What brand you have, yeah.
Well, the thing, like, what he was pointing, like, it was so funny because it was so bluntly obvious that what he was saying was contradicting what he was showing. You know, because it's like if you actually sat there and looked at it and did the math, and then went and looked at what he was saying and going, see, it's not a problem, there's no issue here. It was kind of like, really? There isn't? Because now I've gone from only having to work just one full-time job to pay off my college tuition to now it's 17.8.9 hours to pay for one semester of college. But yeah, there's no problem.
I mean, they can go all the way back to the beginning of the country where, unless you were
Go
rich.
check on your brother. Make sure he didn't drown himself.
No, he poked his head out a minute ago. Unless you were rich, you couldn't pay for college at all.
Mm-hmm.
You were out of the house if you were male at 12, 14 to make a living, and if you were female, they prepared you for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's this lovely cycle that keeps going between the capitalist, and I don't mean small business, I mean the people that are manipulating money. He's ready.
Okay. So pause this again. Hi, I'm Gracie, and I do weird stuff.
I just want pets and more money.
Okay. So, are you willing to watch a couple other videos?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm being tortured.
I didn't know I was torturing my mom, but okay. Why did you... What are you doing? To the center.
See, I'm going through a time tunnel.
I would love to be able to time travel, I feel like. Okay. I'm not sure which order I copied and pasted these on, so... Let's see. Okay. Yay.
However, you might be very surprised to find. So Haiti is the poorest country in the world. However, you might be very surprised to find out why Haiti is the poorest country in the world. Haiti was one of the richest places on the planet in the 1700s. The population of Haiti was 4-to-1 slave to free Frenchmen. So you basically had about 450,000 slaves there and 120,000, 125,000 free Frenchmen and women. Led by a slave named Toussaint, Haiti successfully overthrew one of the most powerful armies on the planet in 1804 and declared their independence. However, France made a deal with them, with warships at the ready, saying that we will invade you, recapture you, and re-enslave you unless you pay for the lost property. Well, that lost property was the human lives of the Haitians themselves. So France slapped Haiti with a $21 billion bill. That's $21 billion in today's money. It took until 1947 to pay off.
So is that like a perfect example of greedy people wanting to get as much money as they can from their slaves that decided to go F you and like...
Oh, France has still not gotten over... I mean, I was surprised that they showed up at their hospital ships after the last big hurricane hit Haiti.
Are they going to slap them with another bill, though?
No, I don't know. It's hard to say with the French. You know, it's like, if you marry a half Frenchman and have babies for my country, then we might accept you. But Earning your freedom from us like that? Yeah.
I'm ashamed of being part French now.
Colonization, you know.
I think this is why I do not register with my French part of my bloodline.
Well, remember what the French did to the natives.
Right.
I mean, yeah, they intermingled with us and didn't treat us like we were non-humans and therefore, you know, can be killed off, but we were also their consorts and I mean, we helped them find beaver and
yeah, and then they like took all of them from us
and went back and made a fortune. I mean, that's the French.
See, I don't think I resonate with my French bloodline. More and more I get into the French. It's like,
oh, French has some really nasty early history.
There's some really nasty current history.
The initial loan. It took Haiti almost 150 years to pay off that loan. And obviously you guys know about loans and financing and debt, so how did Haiti pay that money off? Especially because France forced them to give them 50% off of their products. So Haiti was accounting for 3/4 of the world's sugar at the time, and I think
Okay.
However, you might be very surprised. Called Citibank. That's right. Your bank was also known as the capital of the slave trade. So Haiti was accounting for 3/4 of the world's sugar at the time, and I think a quarter or maybe 1/3 of the entire slave trade at the time. Saint Domingue was also known as the capital of the slave trade in the West Indies, and also the worst place for a slave to end up because it was so brutal, torturous, and you could be raped and kidnapped at any point in time and sent anywhere in the world. So that debt was financed and collected by French banks, as well as an American bank that was established in 1812, which is called Citibank. That's right. Your bank has been collecting money from Haitian people to pay for their own freedom since 1812 and stopped only in 1947. With the natural resources and the people working the land that Haiti had, it should have been one of the richest countries in the world. But the transfer of wealth from Haiti to France and Haiti to French banks and Haiti to American banks to finance what is called the independence debt, which is no more than a debt for the descendants of slavery to continue to pay the countries and the people that enslaved them for their own freedom. It's well documented. It's well documented that the debt was based on slave owners losing their property.
Kind of also reminds you of like, you know, with us getting our checks, you know, 600 to try to make it to the next. And then we're like wondering how much of a debt are we going to have to pay back our government after this? Kind of reminds me of this.
Well, in that way you need to be French. Because the people are the government.
For me, I think one of the things that pisses me off is Americans have forgotten that they are actually the bosses of the government. And we have to kind of... So, yeah, maybe in a way I resonate with my friendship. Go cut off their heads.
Let's see, what's the song, you know? The Angry Men. But yeah, the French will tolerate so much from their government, and then it's like, no, you are our government, and you will listen to us, or else.
I think that American people need to kind of do that.
Yeah. Well, we did in the 60s, and they came down hard.
Yeah. But I think they need to do it again. I wonder if a lot of people are kind of scared to do it again just because of what happened in the 60s, too.
Well, it's hard to say because they've taken that history and colored it in such weird ways. You know, we were all having sex and drugs and listening to rock and roll and weren't really doing anything.
Hey, my generation, apparently all we ever did was see how much cinnamon we could eat, and and then Gen Z is the Tide Pod generation.
In 2004, the Haitian government demanded that France pay back the billions of dollars that it forced the Haitian people to pay for its own freedom. So think about this. It's like France had their warships ready, just basically gangstered their way into Haiti's pockets. After Haiti beat the French military in 1804, by 1825, France had warships at the ready. Off the coast of Haiti, looking at the island like, nice island you got there. Be a real shame if something happened to it. Okay? So basically France is like, nice island you got there. Nice freedom you've gained there. Be ashamed if something happened to it. Wow. That's the most gangster, ridiculous, disgraceful shit I've ever heard in my life. In 2004, the Haitian government demanded that France pay back the billions of dollars it paid to protect its own borders and to be a sovereign nation. Can you imagine if you had to pay somebody so that they wouldn't attack you? If you had to pay somebody so that they wouldn't enslave you? If you had to pay somebody because your great-grandparents had been kidnapped?
Think about the countries in Central and South America.
I was also thinking of the comfort women in Korea.
The comfort women in Korea. I mean, it's unfortunately power, money. It's one of those things like with the natives, you know. We were uprooted, moved, forced onto other tribes.
Forced into these itty-bitty little borders unless we're wide enough to get by, and even then we have to give up our heritage just to...
No, they found gold. Or they found oil. You can't have that land anymore. We want it now. Move us again.
Or make us pay extra high taxes. Never no nation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened to the Navajos.
Yeah.
They were convinced to... It's like, oh, we found all this rich oil on your land, and they were going to move them, and the Navajos were like, fuck you, you're not moving us. So then the white man went, all right, well then let's strike a deal. And we'll give you a percentage of what we make from the oils. And we'll hire your people to work our oil fields. We're not going to tell you we're not going to give you health care, or we're barely going to pay you much for what you're doing, but
or they're
we're
working
going to make
these,
it sound good so you go along with it so we can take your oil.
Working these oil fields, we won't tell you it's going to make you sick. We won't tell you it might pollute your groundwater or your land so you can't grow crops.
But we'll make it sound good that we're going to give you a percentage of what we make from the oil, even though it's the smallest percentage ever. Like, I was looking at the percentage that they receive from all that. I'm like, and I remember, like, when I lived on the reservation in Terrell, I would sit there and I'd count how many oil rigs we would pass.
Right.
And it was just like, why don't we have more money? And I actually looked into it, and I was like, but years later I looked into it because my curiosity got the better of me. And I was just like, they got like one of the most shittiest deals ever. And it's because the white man literally did we're going to paint it with rainbows and butterflies and sparkles and make it look wonderful and all this other stuff, even though it's actually the most shittiest deal ever to be created. But we'll make it sound good so we can get your shit.
But at least you got a deal. You could be like those tribes in California that they had this massive gold find and were just slaughtered, period, because we're not going to put up with making deals with you anymore. We're just going to kill you off.
But hey, you can have 2% of the money we make, and we didn't kill you off.
Right.
Oh, and we kind of did pollute your water and your shit, but hey, we didn't kill you off.
But you can say, well, it's all the Americans that did it, but...
By the way, that case is still on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if it's ever going to get out of there, but it's at least still on the docket.
Well, how long did it take the Cherokees to win their court case?
Took us forever. And sometimes I wonder if we actually won it, like...
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, because they
like
took part of the land away to pay off the debt for drilling for oil.
Yeah.
And a few other things, and it's like with the casinos. You know how many tribes are in debt building casinos, and now they're having to pay them off.
Yeah, like they did it thinking that they were going to get the white man and get their payback, their revenge, but instead it ended up affecting their own people.
Yeah, and again, it's power and money.
Like I remember Grandma Dorothy would go to the casino and she'd always make me sit and count how many natives that I knew that were struggling financially. You know, because they were people we actually knew, and how many were in there.
Right.
And she, like when I did that, I was like, every single one of them. And she's like, yeah. And where do you think their financial troubles come from? And that was like, it didn't really hit me that much when I was that age, because I was a kid. But now looking back at it as an adult, it sickens me.
Yeah, and she and John would have conversations with the Ute chief, and they'd go over this, and well, natives don't enslave and control.
Yeah.
They prefer to tell stories and educate, and
they'd rather you make your own choices, but at least they gave you some guidance to help you make those choices. But they don't want to control you in your choices.
But if you remember, it was about that time the Ute chief started having the natives at the casinos and the bars, and
which you still see. Yeah, and a couple of them, they've heard some Apache, which I'm like, do that on purpose? You probably did.
Yeah. Apache are mean.
They're scary. They're little short, scary people. I'm scared to even say that. I won't knock on my door down.
Right.
Put your sister's name on my face. It's a compliment, I swear.
No, what they did to Haiti was
just horrendous.
Yeah. And still doing off and on. I mean, just leaving them. Well, they wanted their independence. Why should we help them? Yeah. Because hurricanes are common that part of the Gulf. And then, of course, there's Cuba. Most of the conflict between the island of Cuba and the Cubans in Florida. The Cubans in Florida are the wealthy that were exploiting the citizens and were thrown out. So they want their Cuba back. So there's another conflict that is constantly going,
Human history is just fucked up.
The only time we survive is through cooperation. And yet we continually want to do this thing of, well, if I'm all powerful and have lots of money, then you can't bother me until you cut my hair. I mean, that's why.
Off with their head.
That's why France is different, because the ones who have power and money know that their citizens have at one time gathered them up and sliced their heads off in mass scale.
Okay. But I think on that conclusion, I will end this video with human history is fucked up. what we can learn from him.
Right?
I think that's like the most positive note we can leave this one on. Do you have anything to add, Mother Unit?
No.
Okay. We would leave it at that.
I'm gonna go back and watch my Korean murder mystery.
Okay. If you guys would like to join in the conversation, please comment below. Or if you have any ideas for future topics, you can always DM me on all of my social media accounts. Or send me an email at Wyona.am@gmail.com. And my Tumblr blog, WyM3 blog. You can also check out all of my other YouTube videos, my music and books channel, Wyona A.M, and my WyM3 vlog, which is basically my home base and my vlog channel. And of course, if you haven't, also like and subscribe this channel, my Coffee with WyWy channel, where we will have more and more discussions like this one.